Hello, good afternoon. It's Friday, January 8th. It's 1 o'clock Pacific time. I'm Alison Pitt, and I'm the host of Daily Star Trek Views, also Daily Star Trek News, which is the weekly show that has not been on for a couple weeks, and I'm sorry about that. Thank you for joining me. Today, we actually have a whole lot of stuff to get through. I think I say that every single week. Now, on the surface, so there's no news. We won't be talking about news. Well, there may have been news. I haven't been checking it, but we won't be talking about news this week on this show. We're primarily going to be focused on the Discovery season finale. But before that, I am going to talk a little bit about current events. But we'll get onto all that in just a moment. But there will be spoilers. I just want to make sure that everybody knows that before we start off. And please leave some comments in the chat. Let me know what you guys want to talk about, especially with the finale. I do want to mention that while I will be talking about the finale, I'm going to save comments about the whole season as a whole. I'm going to do a big season-long wrap-up next week. So, and I'll remind you about this at the end as well. If you have any comments or questions or things that you particularly want to discuss for the end of season recap, either shoot me an email or you can comment on this video when it's done. Let me know, because I would like to have a section where I'm talking about your guys' feedback on Star Trek Discovery Season 3. And putting that into the context of the bigger season. So we've been doing week by week roundups, and I've refrained from making a lot of judgments from the week to week stuff because of the whole big season arc issue. But next week I will be talking about that. Can I just check in the chat? Can you guys hear me okay? Because I've just realized that I've used the wrong mic again. You can't change it halfway through. Let me see. I still can't change it halfway through. I never use Chrome, and you have to use Chrome in order to do this webcam thing. And so I always set things up on Safari, and then I mess it up when I go over to Chrome. So I'm sorry about that. Okay. First of all, I'd just like to say hi to everybody in the chat. Hello, everyone. I see some familiar faces, and it's great to have you guys all here. The first thing that I want to do today, before I get into talking about Discovery, is that I want to talk about what happened here on Wednesday. And I don't, who am I? I'm nobody, right? I talk about Star Trek. But I do think that when important things happen, it's important that even normal people that are just normal people talk about them and make their positions clear. So I've actually, this is so cheesy, but I have prepared a statement because I wanted to make sure that I got my words right. If it's not clear what I'm talking about the attempted coup in Washington, D.C. on Wednesday, which I didn't get anything done on Wednesday or yesterday because I was glued to the news, and it was incredibly upsetting and made me incredibly angry. And so I distilled some of my thoughts into something that I would like to say specifically in the context of Star Trek and Star Trek fandom. So bear with me. I'm going to read it because I don't want to mess up my words. And all going well, I will edit it and put it up on different social media later. And then you can see it in its entirety. Right. On Wednesday, domestic terrorists staged an attempted coup at the United States Capitol in Washington, D.C. 5 people have died as a result, and while I'd love to say that it was a terrifying moment, it still is a terrifying moment. The outgoing President Donald Trump incited his followers to riot, and he was enabled by a number of other members of the government who all still remain in power. Now, I'm proud to say that all of my elected representatives have already pledged to impeach the president and move towards censuring his enablers in Congress. We will have to wait and see what happens. So why am I saying anything? Because I'm nobody. Who am I? I'm not a political strategist. I'm not a security official. I have no expertise in any of this type of thing. I don't know if anybody does, beyond the fact that I'm a United States citizen. I'm lucky enough to have a few people who take what I say seriously. That would be you folks. And I think it's important to talk about what happened this week. Now, I will try and avoid treating Wednesday's mob as a monoculture. That's something that I hate when Star Trek does it, and it's something that I try to avoid doing in real life too. But there's ample photographic and video evidence that key people that were involved were white supremacists, neo-Nazis. These people stand in direct opposition to one of the really key parts of the Star Trek philosophy, for what that's worth: infinite diversity and infinite combinations. So I wanted to talk a little bit about IDIC and what it means to me. So here's a part where I want to be really careful with my words, because the Star Trek fandom has a tendency to fall into some cult-like behavior, and I absolutely disagree with that. But there are some elements from the show, and it is a television show, that have persisted and flourished in the fandom because they make sense and they resonate with people. IDIC is one of those. Live long and prosper, the Vulcan salute, some of the elements of Klingon culture. These are other examples that also endure because they resonate with people. But I specifically want to talk about IDIC. Infinite diversity and infinite combinations is a really interesting phrase because you can use it as a few different parts of speech. Commonly, we use it as kind of a description of the post-scarcity, utopian, idealistic future that Star Trek often presents. Like, when we get to the Star Trek future, diversity will be commonplace. I mean, that's something that most of us accept. You can also think of IDIC like a roadmap or a missive, instructions on how we get to that utopian future, as in, if you don't embrace IDIC, we'll never get there, that type of thing. But I actually like to think of infinite diversity and infinite combinations in a third way, and that it's a celebration. So IDIC, infinite diversity and infinite combinations, it already exists now. Maybe it's not in your town, or maybe it's not in your workplace, or maybe it's not even in your country, but wherever you are, if you zoom out far enough, we already have infinite diversity and infinite combinations, even in our tiny little planet. There are people who want to deny it. There are people who want to eradicate it, but it's already the truth. And the truth is absolute. It's unassailable, whether you want to believe it or not. Infinite diversity and infinite combinations is a celebration that that truth is good, and it benefits us all, which it does. We are all stronger when we not only welcome, but celebrate our differences. I'm going to take a breath. I condemn the violence that took place in Washington, D.C. this week, and all of the people who participated, incited, or supported it. And those who involved who were doing so on the pretense of white supremacy are solidly on the wrong side of history. Infinite diversity and infinite combinations is the truth, and it's a celebration, and it's the future. Thank you. That's my little rant. That's all I have to say. So Star Trek Discovery. Thank you guys for listening. Seriously, I don't, stuff like that makes me really nervous. I was really out of breath. But I think it's really important to say, I believe completely that the ideology of white supremacy, most of conservative politics in the United States and around the world, is completely at odds with what most of us believe in Star Trek, and I think it needs to go away. So there's that. Anyway, let's talk about Star Trek Discovery. This is I'm kind of gonna follow, I'm totally gonna steal from Mission Log a little bit, and sort of tackle this in three parts. So there was like, you may have seen in the description for this video that I thought it was a little bit of an overcomplicated episode of Star Trek Discovery, and it was. I think that's in the writing. I think that there was a lot of elements of the script that were unnecessary, but I'll come on to that in just a second. I'm going to first talk about those kind of issues, the structure, the production, what it sort of means for the franchise, and then I'm going to go through the very lengthy list of just funny things that I noticed, because there was so much in this episode that I just there were so many elements that I want to talk about that I had to just list them all down in a random order. So, and then at the end, I'll talk a little bit about what I saw as the overall theme of this particular episode of the finale and what that means for Star Trek and for the franchise going forward. So right, to start off, I just want to say that I am actually really impressed with the finale. I thought it was solid. I think that there are obviously some criticisms of it, which I will come on to in just a moment. But on the whole, it was a solid finale and was generally satisfying. There were two main storylines going on. There was the first one was the really fast-paced kind of take back the ship one. And then there was also the much slower-paced stuff that was going on the dilithium planet with Su'Kal and helping him come to terms with his loss. Both storylines I thought were woven together really nicely to give a nice cadence to the episode. So it was that sort of textbook fast, slow, which kind of kept me engaged. And ultimately, both of those storylines were really satisfying. I think they came to a really satisfying conclusion, which I was really pleased to see. I really hate it when writers try to be like really clever and don't give you a good ending. I don't think that happened here. I think the ending was very good. But I think where the episode falls down a little bit is that there were a lot of elements that were not necessary, and it became overly complicated. And those overly complicated elements ended up taking me out of the action a little bit, because in my mind, I'm thinking, that's ridiculous, instead of, ooh, that's really gripping. There were a number of parts that reminded me of the end of Galaxy Quest. And at one point, when literally when the doors opened to the data core, I literally out loud went, this episode was badly written, because there were so many elements that reminded me of like that whole sequence in the end of Galaxy Quest when they have to make it to the center of the Omega-13 and they're going through the chompers, and Sigourney Weaver's character is like, why is this even here? Who wrote this? This episode was terrible. Like, why am I doing this? And there were a number of elements of this that felt like that, when they just didn't need to be there. So an example was the fight in the data core, which was very exciting. What was the weird thing where she's like pushing Burnham into the wall, into the programmable matter? It didn't make sense. It didn't need to be done. They could have had a nice bit of choreography that was suspenseful and worked with the show, but it was needlessly complicated and made me sitting there going, what's that thing? I don't understand what that thing is. I don't know if I have, I'm trying to think of another, my mind is blanking on another example of the needless complications, but okay, I'm just going to talk about the data core. I have it on my list. But I was ranting about this earlier. I have this on my list of the things that I noticed. But this was actually a really big element that took me out of the whole thing. Why is there a data core on Star Trek Discovery? It makes no damn sense. It looks good dramatically. I liked the design. I thought that was really great. Modern computing nowadays really doesn't have a data core. Any kind of software application that you use is running on a decentralized group of identical servers, and server load gets dynamically managed between all of these different places. You just can't convince me that in a 32nd century refit starship that the computer has a central core. It just doesn't make any damn sense at all. I don't even think it's something that we've seen in other iterations of Star Trek. And while it is effective for this current plot, that Burnham had a place that she needed to journey to in order to be able to reset the system, it's antithetical to what I'm used to seeing in Star Trek and what I understand about modern computers, and it took me out of that moment. So the gist of it is that there were overly complicated elements of this plot. All the like Willy Wonka turbo lifts was like another one that just didn't need to be there, and I think made the rest of the action feel forced and didn't really add anything to the plot. So I would have liked to see those elements taken out and simplified a little bit. But on the whole, like I said, it really didn't detract from the overall feeling that was satisfying and a good end to the show. So the one question that I have, they kind of left us on a note that is very clearly showing us what we can sort of expect from season 4, which is fantastic. But it leaves me kind of with the question, are we compromising Discovery's identity? And what is Discovery? So I'm going to leave you to kind of ponder on that for a few minutes, because I'm going to come back and talk about it at the end. I think it's a really important question for us to kind of talk about. So I'm going to move on now to just a really random list of things that I wanted to point out that were funny, that I just found either funny or weird or amusing or whatever. And I would encourage you to please put some of your own in the chat. Let me know like bits and pieces that you thought were funny or weird things that you noticed in this episode, because there was so much there. Like I said, they crammed it all in. There were a lot of elements. Okay, first of all, if you, like me, were watching the hallway scene going, who the hell is that girl? There was just a crew member that turned up, and I think she's been in the last couple of episodes, but I was sitting there going, who is she? Why is she hanging out with the bridge crew? Where did she come from? Why is she all of a sudden a central character in Star Trek Discovery? I'm talking about the brunette girl. She was kind of at the back of the pack. That was an actor by the name of Ava Blackwell, and I think her character was called Lieutenant Ina, and it's really interesting. I think it's really interesting because I recognized her name from one of the bridge crew members that we have seen earlier in the season was called Osnulus. There are a few of that species around. If you remember Captain Rama, I believe it was, at Starfleet headquarters when earlier in the season when Vance was doing sort of going around the table saying what everyone was doing. Captain Rama was also that same species, and that was also Ava Blackwell. That was also Ava Blackwell. She's played about 5 different characters, including Lieutenant Ina, and I just. It was just so funny. That was actually one of the elements that took me out of it, because I was like, who is she? Why do I suddenly care about her? And it's funny because I kind of feel like they started her off as being Osnulus, and then they were like, dude, that makeup is too hard. But we like the actor. And I laugh because it seems like the same thing that they did with Sarah Middich, who, of course, in the first season of Discovery was Arium, and then became Lieutenant Nilsson in the second season, and then now she's around. I really did think I didn't understand why it was Lieutenant Ina and not Nilsson in that whole scene, but I don't care. It didn't really impact overall. It just was a thing that didn't quite make sense. But I just wanted to call out Ava Blackwell because she has played a stunning number of roles so far, even though you couldn't see her face. And it's like she's trying to compete with Kenneth Mitchell for the most number of roles in a current Star Trek series. So, right, I'm crossing that off. I'm also gonna actually wrote down what TF is a data core, but we already covered that. I won't rant about that too much more. The Willy Wonkifying of the turbo lifts was something that I heartily disagree with, but I'm willing to let it slide. I know there's precedent before. I was kind of hoping that the inside of Discovery didn't look like the inside of the Enterprise, but whatever. It doesn't make any damn sense for a number of reasons. First of all, where there was no life support on any floors above or below 5, so where were the turbo lifts going? You can never convince me that they've pressurized that entire gigantic empty space inside of a starship. It makes no sense. And that's before we even get to the scale, because I'm pretty certain, yes. Peter in the chat says it's like the TARDIS. Yes, either that or there's like a static spatial anomaly living inside of Star Trek Discovery. And by the way, there's like a ring of air in the Discovery. It doesn't make any damn sense, but you know what? It's a science fiction television show, and I almost respect their doubling down on the ridiculousness of it. That was a cool bit of action. I thought it was kind of neat, but I really don't understand why we couldn't have had just a turbo lift shaft like we've had in every other Star Trek. And I know it's like we've had in every other Star Trek, but that would have been fine. Anyway, there, I crossed off Willy Wonka. 2 NPCs that I was disappointed in missing. I was let down by the role of the .23s in this episode. They were essentially, they came, and if you were watching this show last week, I was very excited about the role of the .23s as the keepers of the sphere data and how they were going to be pivotal in taking back the ship. And in the end, they were just kind of cannon fodder. Okay, yes, that one saved Owo. That's true, okay? But outside of that one who saved Owo and the others that just kind of got shot and exploded in the hallway, I was disappointed that they didn't have a more intelligent role in the finale. And what's funny is so Paul in the chat also says, what the hell were the other two doing? Until you said that right now, I actually assumed that there was a whole bunch of them. And it never occurred to me that there might have only been those 3, because I know I saw a couple getting exploded in the hallway. But anyway, I feel like that was a missed opportunity at the end of the last. I thought that the appearance of them at the end of the last episode was so strong and so exciting, and then they kind of fumbled the ball a little bit, to use a sports analogy, which, if you know me, that's ridiculous. But also, where was Grudge? Do you guys know? I thought Grudge was still in sickbay, and I was totally looking forward to Grudge jumping out and clawing Osiris' face. But I guess she must have been back on bookship. I'm not sure. While we're talking about book and Grudge and book, an interesting development which I started thinking about. So I don't know that Kwejian is not a part of the Federation. They kind of talked, if I remember correctly, or maybe they are. Does anybody know off the top of your head whether they're actually part of the Federation or whether they were just a planet? Because Osiro likes to interfere in first contact situations. With book operating the spore drive, which I'm not even going to comment on, that implies that anyone from Kwejian, anyone with those special telepathic abilities, would be able to operate a spore drive, which is really interesting because now that they've got Aurelio and they've got Book being able to operate the spore drive, theoretically, we should be able to create more spore drives and roll them out and recruit people from Kwejian to help drive them. We're no longer in that situation where that we started the season on, if you remember, where Stamets is the only one in the entire universe who can drive a spore drive. So we're kind of opening up a little bit of possibility, and I think they really kind of glossed over. I think they really kind of glossed over that at the end, especially because now we've found a way to mine the dilithium off that planet, so dilithium isn't a problem anymore. That was a neat little wrapping up of that issue. So are we going to spore dry, or are we going to dilithium? I don't know. I was really hoping that they would find a physical or scientific way to help the spore drive operate, rather than what borders on mysticism. And I'm very careful to not say magic, because of course in Star Trek, anything that you don't, what is it? Anything that's sufficiently like beyond, like technology beyond your level of understanding is magic. I don't think what we're seeing is magic. I think that's just that it borders on mysticism. For me, it falls into the same category as the time crystals, which is a little bit more on the fantasy magic side of things rather than plausible scientific advancement. But I don't want to get into that discussion. But it's good. I'm glad that they've sort of resolved that. And we seem like we're going into season 4 with a bit of a clean slate, which is kind of an interesting idea. I have 2 more things that I want to say on just these little bits and pieces, and then I'll look at your chat before I sort of finish up. So I just about lost it when Aditya Sahil walked in. I was so happy. I literally exclaimed out loud. I was so happy to see him. That just, like, even now I'm thinking about it, it makes me so happy. That man that sat there for literally his entire life, believing in something that for all the world may not have existed. And he sat there waiting as a sentinel for the next person who could come along and maybe give him some answers, and he sat there with no promise of anything. Right. And he did it for decades. And I mean, I really, for him to then be able to be in Starfleet is just so, that was the happy ending. That was the happy ending of this whole journey. And I thought it was absolutely wonderful for him. I hope he comes back. I love his face. He just has such a kind face. And I think I would love to see him be part of the next season of Discovery. So fingers crossed. And then one sort of last thing, and I don't really know how I feel about it, is that I really didn't understand at all the Adira and Gray storyline that was happening here. And I've been thinking about it. I can't really figure it out. Is Gray really real? Like a ghost? Or is he just a very strong part of Adira's sort of psyche, sort of past experiences because of her integration with the symbiont? And I don't really understand it. Like, can people see him now? I don't understand. I'm okay with not understanding it. I have enough faith in those actors and the storyline that they've sort of written, and I'm so happy to see them represented on screen that I'm kind of willing to let it go. I have a feeling that that's something that we're going to see in season 4, that they will find a way to, I don't know, have some kind of like psychic implant in Adira's head or something that basically is able to project. I don't know. But I don't really understand it. Zach says in the chat, I hope they dive into it next season in more detail. And like, we got half an episode of his story. I agree with you. And also, Christoph, I agree with you too. He says, I perceived Gray as a former host visualized by the holomatrix. That's kind of what I perceived at first. But then there were some things that didn't make sense. Like when he walked through the wall of the holographic projection. I mean, it didn't look like he kind of walked all the way out, but like I had flashbacks to, was it not Elementary Dear Data, but the other one where he's like, he walks out of the holodeck. I was like, are we seeing him walking out of the hollow projection, or is he just sort of on the edge? Or I didn't know what was going on. That was confusing to me, and left me a little confused, which is a shame because I thought there was a tremendous amount of potential for that storyline, and it just kind of was there. Anyway, right, I'm going to take a quick little, sorry, it's already 1:30. I'm going to take a quick look at the chat here and see if I missed anything important. Boy, you guys have been chatty today. Zach, in all caps, they saved Owo. That was when we were talking about the .23. I tell you what, I was screaming at the screen. I was like, they better not kill Owo. I'm so glad that she got to be the one to go and set off that device, because she's like an outstanding actor. She is very nice to look at. And she absolutely deserves to be front and center of the action, because she's a total badass and she's really smart. The character, I don't know the actor personally, but I'd like to think that she's similar. I was really, really pleased with that. The whole stuff about her being a freediver was dumb. We didn't need to know that. But, again, it falls into that category of they over-explained. There was too much stuff going on. BC says, yes, WTF was that blue wall thing. Yeah, I read after the fact. I think that it was some programmable matter. It doesn't make any sense. I'm kind of intrigued to find out. So sorry to go on a slight tangent, and I hope you guys can stick around for a few more minutes, because I do have a few more things to say. So one thing that was missing was Zora, right? I kind of expected for this to be the genesis of Zora. We know that Zora has kind of shown up a little bit. We know that the sphere data is kind of is capable of moving around. I wonder if I mean, first of all, what a security threat is it that you have like the inside? It's like the intestines of the computer just like on a wall. I wonder, I don't know, it's kind of dumb, but I wonder if like, I actually thought that was gonna, I genuinely for a split second thought, wow, Sonequa Martin Green's leaving the show. I thought that was going to be her getting integrated, and that was the final piece that we needed for Zora to become Zora. And then she shot her way out, and then that didn't happen. So, I don't know. But I do kind of wonder if that integration, that momentary piece where she was enveloped by the wall of the data core, I wonder if there will be some of that we'll find out. I would love it. That would be great sci-fi. I don't want to make predictions because I'll probably be proved dumb, but like now that she's the captain of the ship, it would be wonderful, because Saru saw a little bit of the evolution of Zora, and it would be really interesting if we find out that because of that incident, Zora, the computer, and Burnham end up having a special connection with each other. That'd be really an interesting thing to explore from a science fiction perspective. Anyway, yeah. BC says, you have a lot of chat scrolling to do. I have decided that I'm not going to scroll all the way back to the beginning. So if you said something really poignant, you might want to put it in the chat again. Hosen Zarfungal has proposed a short trek of Burnham's time inside the programmable matter, which would be kind of a crazy fun thing. If you were listening to Priority One podcast at the end of Discovery Season 2, so I really didn't dig Season 2. It was not really my bag, but at the end, I really enjoyed. I can't remember the name of the episode, the 2-part season finale. The second one had some really, really great old school science fiction imagery, and stuff that reminded me of Star Trek: The Motion Picture, reminded me of 2001, and I would love to see more of that in Star Trek. So we kind of take for granted that Star Trek is science fiction, but we really haven't done much of the high science fiction like we used to see in like the 60s and 70s, like the really weird stuff where you were really constrained. You didn't really have computer graphics, and so you were really constrained to getting super creative with your visuals. We haven't really seen an awful lot of that in modern Star Trek, and I would love if they did a short trek of Burnham's time inside that, and it was like crazy, full on like hardcore sci-fi. That would be a really good use of that format. So, Such Sweet Sorrow, season 2. Thank you, Peter. That's the name of that episode. So thank you. Right. Okay. So the last thing that I wanted to talk about was just to talk about the central, what I sort of saw as the theme that was running through this episode, and what I think it means for our the identity of Discovery going forward. And the big theme for me this episode was trust. That the idea of trust being the fundamental thing that you need in order to move forward. That was a key element of the plots of both the sort of real fast ship stuff going on and also the stuff down on the Dilithium planet. It was wonderful to watch Saru totally in his element as a caretaker. Slowly earning Su'Kal's trust and watching their relationship develop to the point where he felt supported enough to go in and turn off the holo. I loved watching that happen. I thought that was done with a lot of compassion and a lot of intelligence. I think you can tell that this episode, along with a number of other episodes this season, were written by women. For me, that seems like a really good influence on the script writing and the story. But we also saw that trust coming through on the action-y side, and that was like hard. That was like action. I loved the moment when Burnham called into Vance and he basically said, "You have to trust me." And it was accumulation of everything that's happened in Burnham's journey this entire season. And we started off very explicitly saying, "I don't trust you. I don't even know who you are." She had a couple of missteps, really big ones, and then she ended up continuing to earn his trust, and that was really what got them out of a really horrible situation. So I liked seeing that parallel theme running in both storylines. I also particularly like the scenes on the ship because I think we got a really a strong depiction of the things that me as a fan, I think make Starfleet what Starfleet is, and why the idea of Starfleet and Star Trek is inspirational. These are things like trust, again, self-sacrifice, a feeling of duty, endurance, persistence, grit. Watching them work out the fact that they were all going to die and that they could, that they needed to just keep going. Peter in the chat says teamwork. Yes, teamwork. The moment where the crew is telling Owo that she has to go ahead and she doesn't want to do it, but she has to go ahead. That moment was heartbreaking for a number of reasons. Number one, because Owo knew that she was going to be the one to die, and then of course the others knowing that they just couldn't do it and they had to give up what they had in order to help her. That was sort of wonderful to see on our screens. I thought it was a little, as Michelin would say, bonk bonk on the head, but for a Star Trek show, I think that was absolutely the right way to handle that, and I appreciated it. So earlier in this live stream show, excuse me, I talked about what this episode means for the identity of Discovery going forward. And one of the things that I took away from this, and it's not even a criticism, I don't really know, I don't feel like I know what this show is supposed to be. They changed the uniforms. Saru is gone. Burnham's the captain. We're totally in, they've reinvented Discovery again, and I don't really know what we're supposed to make of that. We've set up season 4 that it looks like it's going to be exploration again. Like it could, I mean, they even ran through a list of these are all the places we need to visit. It felt like it feels like they're setting us up to be episodic, even more so than they did in season 3. And that confuses me because that's supposed to be Strange New Worlds. And I suppose they could do that both in the far future and in Strange New Worlds. There's no reason that they can't do it in both, but that's not really kind of what I understood. And then I don't know what to think of Discovery anymore. Discovery has a pretty strong identity, for better or for worse. Not everyone likes it, but in terms of, there are 3 seasons in now. What you think of when you think of Discovery, you think action over science, you think long, complicated story arcs, you think individual focus, so that's on Michael Burnham. And now it seems like we're going to move towards something, because Michael Burnham is going to find it harder to be the center of attention all the time when she's captaining a ship, because she's got to be there captaining whatever, she's not going to be in every away team anymore because she's got to be on the ship. So, they're setting us up for these changes that are very different from what you think of Discovery being in the past. And I don't really know how to think of Discovery. Now, that's their prerogative. They can change the show as much as they want. I don't write the show, they write the show. It's fine. But it's, as a viewer, that's confusing and I don't know what to expect. And as somebody who talks about Star Trek, I really don't know how to talk about Discovery to somebody who isn't already aware of it, because it keeps changing. And I know they've had some really big leadership changes, and there's a lot of extenuating circumstances why that might be. It's hard to talk about. Discovery still, it's a series that I respect. I certainly enjoyed season 3 a lot more than I had enjoyed prior seasons, but I still am not sure that it's, for me, quite what I want out of the Star Trek franchise. So I don't know. I'm expecting that we'll see season 4 this year. I know nobody else does, but I expect that we'll see it this year. I have no insider information. So yeah, I think that's it. Look, so normally, you've seen this before, I have my little notebook that I write my notes in. And today I actually had to get a piece of paper with all my scribbled on notes because there was so much. And I'm looking forward to hearing sort of, if you guys have comments and stuff, please either email me at info@dailystartreknews.com or comment on this video below, because I would love to hear some feedback on the series as a whole for the show next week. So, right, I'm just gonna take a couple more minutes and just chat with you guys. How are you? For those of you who are in the United States, it's been a little bit of a stressful week. I think that's an understatement. How are you doing, I think is the question. So Peter says, it will be a bit sad that after 23 weeks of New Trek, we are now on a break from New Trek. Yeah, that's... Speaking as a Star Trek content creator, I'm kind of looking forward to having a little bit of a break, but I am slightly worried that there's going to be no news. I don't think that's true because I've been in some slow periods before and there's never not been any news, but I'm a little bit worried about that. I also think that I wouldn't be so quick to judge that there's never going to be Star Trek again. Keep in mind that at least 2 series are already pretty far in production and are animation based. And while CBS has not given us any indication of when those were coming out, I think they would be remiss to not try and get those out as soon as possible, because they have numbers to hit as well. Viacom CBS is growing the CBS All Access product, Paramount Plus product, very quickly, and Star Trek is a flagship of that. They have at least 2 parts of Star Trek that could be leveraged more quickly than others because of the pandemic, of course. And, short treks has a tendency to pop up on you unexpectedly. And again, I have no insider information, but there's no reason that you can't put out a 10-minute short trek that has nothing to do with anything and then not put another one out for 3 months. I know that we've, in the past, have seen them on a weekly basis, in like a little tiny mini short season or whatever, but there's no reason that they can't activate them, especially in the day and age of, YouTube and internet media. I would be surprised if we really have nothing over the next couple of months. So please try not to despair. Christoph points out, of course, that people overseas are getting Lower Decks in a couple of weeks. I'm so excited for you to watch that. I was not doing this show when Lower Decks was on, if I recall. And it's a great show. Let's see. Da-da-da-da. Hi, Nomi. I think that's how you pronounce your name. Hello from Costa Rica. Somebody, and I missed it, who said that the bridge crew is like all humans? I think that might have been you, Christoph. Which is interesting. It didn't used to be. It wasn't when we started off. Remember Daft Punk? Who lasted like, what, 2 episodes? We had Daft Punk, we had Arium. Osnolis used to be on the bridge, or was she in engineering? And we had Saru, and you're right, now everybody's human. Well, except for, no. What is Book now? He's definitely not bridge crew, but he gets to hang out on the bridge. So, I don't know. Hal asks, I have a friend just getting into Trek. Do you think she should start with Lower Decks? It's as good a place as any. People who are here in the chat and watching, put your suggestions below on where you think a good starting point is for Star Trek. It's hard for me to say whether Lower Decks would be a good starting point, because so much of it is inside jokes, and because I am at a very deep level in Star Trek, most of those I get most of them. I don't know if you were somebody who knew nothing about Star Trek whether it would still be funny. I don't know. It's hard to say. Yes, Muhammad said exactly the same thing. But I haven't heard from anybody who wasn't. Everybody that I know that was watching Lower Decks was already a Star Trek fan and had been for years. So I don't know. My entry point for my kids has been, well, my son won't watch it, but that's because I suggested it, and anything that I suggest is automatically uncool. So there's nothing I can do about that. My daughter, we watched Star Trek 4, the one with the whales. And recently we watched the Sherlock Holmes one, Elementary, Dear Data. That should have been obvious. And she still talks about that one. She's had no appetite whatsoever to watch any of the other episodes of Star Trek. We're working on it. But those ones are accessible because they already, what's the word? You can already relate to them straight out of the box, because Star Trek 4 takes place in the 80s. And Elementary, Dear Data, everybody knows Sherlock Holmes. So it's a good sort of entry point personally for those. They're very easy to relate to. We got a couple of suggestions here. Voyager is good for a lot of new people. I agree. Voyager is kind of like Next Gen Light for me. I like Voyager, but it's kind of the fluffy version of TNG until you start getting into like some of the Borg stuff. The animated series is actually a really good suggestion, Zach. The animated series, if you haven't watched it, it will surprise you. There's some really good stuff in there. It's an Emmy-nominated or an Emmy-winning episode of the animated series, so it's really good quality stuff. And then a couple people have said TNG in general, anywhere in TNG is a good starting point, but season 3 is probably where it kicks off. In seasons 1 and 2, you get all the drama with Tasha Yar and Dr. Pulaski. And while I really like seasons 1 and 2, I think that as a new person, you might see it as being a little inside baseball. Oh, it's another sports analogy. Zach, I also love Pulaski. I hated her originally at the beginning because I love Dr. Crusher, and I still do. I have met Gates McFadden, and I love her to death. But as an older person, as a grown up, Pulaski is, I think, one of the most important characters in Star Trek. I can rant about that on a different day. I would also, if you're introducing someone to Star Trek, definitely show her one of the stupid episodes, because I think one of the really key things about Star Trek and what makes people love it so much is that there are always breaks where they don't take themselves too seriously. The Game is a great one. It's dorky and but it's wonderful. If you're brave, you can show her Sub Rosa because it's way out there. Any of the holodeck episodes are good. The reason that Star Trek works for me and what got into it is because it built a world where you can live an entire life and you can place yourself there. So the more diverse things you can show someone, the better. I'm gonna stop talking now because I think we've demonstrated that I could talk about Star Trek forever. I'm really glad that you guys are all here today. Thank you very much. It's been a difficult week and I'm tired and I don't want to do it anymore. I just want to go sleep. But thank you for joining me while I talk about Star Trek. It's always a bright point of my week. Before I go, I do just want to say that if you like what we're doing here on two things. If you like what we're doing here on Daily Star Trek News, then please consider contributing to our Patreon. That's patreon.com/Daily Star Trek News. You guys make it possible for what we're doing. Also, you will have noticed this week that I did a bunch of Star Trek stories. I did them last week and this week, and I hope you've been enjoying them. I really, really love it when people submit Star Trek stories because everybody has one. If there's any moms who are listening, every mom has a birth story. And they put a bunch of moms in a room. At some point, they'll all start talking about their birth stories. And I find that Star Trek fans are like that too. Everyone has a Star Trek story of how they like their first memories of Star Trek, or what the thing was that they decided that they needed to be a Star Trek fan. I love reading those people's stories, and I love sharing them with everybody else. So if you haven't yet, or even if you have and you think of something different, please send them in. I kind of keep them in a file, and then whenever we need to take a week's break, or if something happens, I put them out as special episodes. So please send them in. You can go to dailystartreknews.com/Star Trek Stories, all one word, and there's more information, and you can read the other ones too. And I really hope that you'll consider sending one in because we love them. Let's see. BC says, Alison, would you consider would you do occasional Zoom meetups like Mission Log does for Patreon? That's one of the things that I'm considering. I would love to have, like, because this is pretty like one way, except for the chat, and I would love to figure out a way that works to be a little bit more interactive. Currently, my schedule doesn't permit that, but it's one of the many things that I'm considering doing. So. Oh, and one last thing, because I know Mohammed is in the chat or was in the chat. Please go and check out his YouTube channel. It's BioTrekkie Explains. He is gearing up for a new series that he's doing with Admiral Jane Brooke. I know she's not an admiral in real life, but Admiral Cornwell. And it looks like it's going to be a really great series. I watched their introduction episode, and they have a really great chemistry together. And you should go and subscribe to his channel and watch those when they come out. I believe they're starting on Sunday. So go and check that out. That's all. I'm going to sign off now. Thank you again for joining me, and we will be back with the normal show on Monday, and we'll be back with the live show next Friday. And like I said, if you want to send me some feedback to talk about on the show next Friday pertaining to the whole season of Discovery, then please either comment below here or you can send me an email too. Other than that, I'll stop talking now. Thank you for joining me. We'll see you next week. Bye.